The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and something worse, the particular silence that settles into a house right before something breaks forever. Mara had come home that Friday afternoon without warning, which was the only reason she heard any of it at all. Her key was still in the front door lock when her father's voice floated down the hallway, low and deliberate, the voice he used for business calls and arguments he thought he was winning. The agent says we can list it at $480. Maybe $490 if we stage it right. She stepped inside quietly. Her mother's heels clicked against the kitchen tile, a nervous rhythm Mara had known since childhood. "And Ruth?" her mother asked. A pause. Brief, but the kind that holds an entire decision inside it. Cedarview has a room opening up next month. Memory care wing. She won't need the house anymore. She barely knows she's in it half the time. Mara stood frozen in the hallway. Her coat was still on. Her bag was still on her shoulder. The world outside the window looked exactly the same. Same maple tree, same gray October sky. But something had shifted so completely that she felt the floor might not hold her. Grandma Ruth was 81 years old. She still tended her garden every morning. She still called Mara every Sunday at 9 o'clock sharp. She still made tea the old way, loose leaves and a strainer, and sat at the same kitchen table she had sat at for 43 years. She was not a woman who barely knew where she was. She was the most anchored person Mara had ever known. And her parents were selling her house, the house she lived in, without telling her, without asking her, as though she were furniture to be cleared before the new owners arrived. Mara did not say a word. She pulled her key out of the lock, gently, so it made no sound. She turned around, walked back to her car, and sat there for a long moment with both hands on the sills, steering wheel and her vision blurring at the edges. Then she started the engine and drove straight to Grandma Ruth's house, because whatever was happening, Ruth deserved to hear it from someone who loved her first. The drive to Grandma Ruth's house took 11 minutes. Mara knew because she had driven it 1,000 times, after school, after heartbreaks, after the kind of days that only Ruth's kitchen could fix. But this time, her hands were shaking on the wheel, and every red light felt like a cruelty. Ruth's house sat at the end of Clover Street, a small white craftsman with green shutters and a front garden that embarrassed every neighbor on the block in the best possible way. Even in October, the rose bushes still held a few stubborn blooms. The porch light was on, the way it always was after 4 o'clock, because Ruth believed no one should come home to a dark house. Mara rang the bell, even though she had a key. It felt important, somehow, to be let in. Ruth answered in her house dress and reading glasses, a paperback pressed open against her palm. She took one look at Mara's face and stepped back from the door. "Come in and sit down," she said. Not a question. Mara sat at the kitchen table and told her everything. Ruth listened without interrupting, which was one of the things that had always made her extraordinary. She set her book down. She folded her hands. When Mara finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Then Ruth stood up, walked to the small secretary desk in the corner of the living room, and opened the bottom drawer with a brass key she wore on a chain around her neck. She returned to the table and set down a manila envelope. "Open it," she said. Inside was a deed. The house on Clover Street, transferred to Mara's name, notarized, filed, and recorded with the county, dated 3 years ago. "I had a feeling," Ruth said simply, lowering herself back into her chair. "Not about anything specific. Just a feeling, the way you get when you've lived long enough. Your parents have been watching this house like it was a prize to be collected. I decided to make sure it couldn't be." Beneath the deed was a bank statement, a savings account in Mara's name. $47,000, built quietly over a decade in small deposits. Ruth reached across the table and covered Mara's hand with her own. "That house," she said, "has always been yours, my love. I just needed the paperwork to agree." The call came on a Tuesday morning, and Mara knew from her mother's tomb. One title search had gone through, that the title search had gone through. She let it ring twice before answering. "There's been some kind of mistake." Her mother's voice was clipped, the particular tone she used when she was frightened but refusing to show it. The buyer's lawyer called the real estate agent. "They're saying the property title shows a different owner. They're saying it shows A pause, sharp and disbelieving. Your name. That's correct, Mara said. Silence. Then her father's voice came on, which meant they had been sitting together, waiting for her to pick up, both of them, rehearsed and ready. Mara, this is not funny. We need to sort this out before the sale closes. Your grandmother clearly didn't understand what she was signing. Something cold and steady settled in Mara's chest. Grandma Ruth understood exactly what she was signing. She's had the deed in her possession for 3 years. It was notarized, witnessed, and filed with the county recorder's office. There's nothing to sort out. Her father's voice shifted registers, softer now, which was somehow worse. Sweetheart, we were trying to do what was best for your grandmother. Cedarview is a wonderful facility. She needs proper care, professional care, more than we can. She tends her garden every morning, Mara said. She read 2 books last week. She called me Sunday at 9 o'clock, same as she has every Sunday for 15 years. She paused. The house is mine. The sale is canceled. And Grandma Ruth is not going to Cedarview. The dinner happened anyway. Her mother had insisted, the way she always insisted, on managing chaos through the appearance of normalcy. A roast on the table, cloth napkins, the good dishes that only came out when something needed to look civilized. Mara sat across from both of them and let her mother talk. The explanations came in waves: financial pressures, property taxes, the burden of upkeep, the cost of everything these days. Her father nodded along, adding weight where her mother's voice thinned. Mara listened to all of it. She ate her dinner quietly, and when the table finally fell silent, she looked at them both and said, with complete calm, "The house stays. Grandma stays. And this conversation is over." She meant every word. The first thing Mara did was change the locks. Not out of anger, or not only out of anger, but because some doors, once you understand who was willing to walk through them uninvited, need a different key going forward. Ruth watched from the porch with a cup of tea and said nothing, which was its own kind of approval. They settled into a rhythm over the following weeks that felt less like an arrangement and more like something that had always been waiting to happen. Ruth kept her bedroom, her garden, her Sunday morning routine. Mara took the small back room that had always been called the guest room, but had really, for as long as she could remember, felt like hers. She hung her coat on the hook by the back door. She learned which burner on Ruth's stove ran hot. She stopped feeling like a visitor. The renovation was Ruth's idea. Nothing dramatic. Fresh paint in the front rooms, the bathroom fixtures replaced, the porch boards that had been soft for 2 years finally properly repaired. Mara used some of the savings account, carefully, the way Ruth had always handled money, with respect rather than urgency. The house seemed to respond. It straightened somehow, the way a person does when someone is finally paying attention. Her parents called twice more in the first month. The conversations were brief and went nowhere. By the second month, they stopped calling. Mara felt the loss of it, genuinely, in the way you feel the loss of something that was never quite what you needed it to be. But she did not chase it. It was Ruth who found the letter, tucked inside the deed envelope behind all the other papers. She handed it to Mara on a Sunday morning, saying only that she had written it 3 years ago and kept forgetting to give it over properly. Mara read it at the kitchen table, while Ruth worked in the garden outside the window. It was 4 pages, handwritten, and it said everything: why Ruth had done it, what she had seen, what she hoped for. It ended simply, "I always knew you would come. I just made sure there was something here worth coming to." Mara folded it carefully and held it against her chest for a long moment. Outside, Ruth was cutting the last of the October roses, humming something old and tuneless, and completely content.